Hey, hi, what's up? It's Ashley here. I'm literally in my PJs, but I just need to preface with this. I tried something new with my makeup and I absolutely despise it. I loathe its very being. So if you're looking at my forehead, it's not blended well, and that is my fault. And I look old. I don't like my makeup. I look old, but please just disregard it and just watch the video. Thank you. Expression. Alright. My lips were feeling tight. I don't have my mic, so excuse the trash audio. My hands are dry. Yeah. What is up, guys? It's Ashley. Welcome back to my channel. And if you're new, hello, I'm Ashley Ann. Welcome to my channel. I just go by Ashley. Hey. I'm trying to think of like a good prelude to what this video is, but I don't really have one. Hi, I'm Ashley. I like to call myself a writer because I've been writing for 8 years. So yeah, I like to write fiction, like realistic fiction, more young adult type of genre. I also like poetry as well. Yeah, man, okay. I also have a blog as well where I also do a lot of writing, so I don't know why I'm so awkward about this. So yeah, I like to call myself a writer, but I like to call myself an amateur writer because, I don't know, I guess I'm still learning. I have been writing, like I said, for 8 years, and you learn a couple things along the way, you know? And with 8 years of writing, it makes you think like, wow, school really screwed me over. And so in today's video, I want to share 10 things that I learned as an amateur writer, and hopefully it can help you improve your writing. I want to say that a lot of these things, I feel like I had to unlearn rather than learn. It was through the unlearning that I learned how to write better. Number 1, said is dead. In school, being told that said is dead, that we don't use said, we try to use other words in place of said. So she chuckled, she laughed, he mumbled, he murmured, she sighed, he exclaimed, she promised, he assured, stuff like that. Like, we were taught to use any other word but said. And what's crazy is that is not the case. If you watch any video on YouTube of amateur writing, amateurs typically stray away from using said. Only pros know that you mostly use said. So in your work, said is actually the default that you should use, not any other synonym you could possibly think of. And it's funny because in school I was told, never use said, don't use said, it makes you a bad writer, use anything else but said. And it's ironic because now if you keep doing that, you look like a bad writer. So school just like lied to me. You can use said. In fact, it's encouraged to use said more than using all those other words because you just sound like you're really scratching your brain to think of other stuff to say. And most of the time it's very unnatural too if you try to use other words that are not said. So just use said, okay? Number 2, Wattpad. That in itself. This is not me trying to trash on Wattpad because I grew up using Wattpad as well, or just reading from it. I think anybody who is a writer or an aspiring writer, I think we've all grown up on Wattpad and just reading other people's work and thinking like this is it. Wattpad cannot replace like authors. Wattpad cannot replace published, like traditional published or self-published authors. Now, can you consider Wattpad writers self-published authors? I guess you can. However, I feel like the thing about calling yourself a self-published author on Wattpad is that you're not getting the second pair of eyes you might need. You're not getting the editor who can help you fix things. But where I'm going with this is Wattpad's really good when you're 12, which is when I started reading it. When you're 12 and you're just trying to see other people's voices and seeing how people experiment with how they write. Wattpad's good for that if you'd like to see people's different writing styles. I think it's terrific for that. Wattpad is really what encouraged me to keep writing anyway. So it has its pros, but I think as you get older, you shouldn't rely on Wattpad entirely because Wattpad, I'm sure there are some gems hidden in there somewhere, but the most popular ones that see the light of day tend to be very juvenile, cheesy, bad. I don't want to say bad because I feel like writing can can sometimes be subjective. It's just like, people make a lot of jokes, a lot of memes of Wattpad writing. There's the constant use of a bad boy and a good girl, which is so overly done. Then there's the amount of times a writer uses the word orbs instead of eyes. Please stop using orbs instead of eyes. Please stop. And please stop referring to guys with blue eyes as ocean eyes all the time. It's annoying after a while. Let's try something else. There are other synonyms for blue. Like I said, Wattpad is one of those things where, because I would read so much of people's work, it was affecting my writing, and it can become a difficult task to have to unlearn everything you learned from Wattpad. I don't think Wattpad is the safest thing to use if you're trying to advance in your writing. I think if you just need something to entertain you, sure, read Wattpad books, but don't use it as if it's a tool to improve your writing. Number 3, the bad boy with the bad temper. This is so overly used and it actually drives me insane. It's so toxic. See, I'm going back to Wattpad on this. Wattpad had a plethora of just books with a bad boy and a good girl. A bad boy who literally insulted and emotionally abused a character, yet that's seen as attractive. Or the bad boy who had a really bad temper that he probably should have gotten looked at, but we find that attractive. And it's stuff like that that's dangerous. Not only is it dangerous for the little kids who are reading it thinking that a guy being angry is attractive, that's bad, but it's also bad because it affects a lot of people who want to become writers. If I were to show you the first book I was working on, I wasn't planning on publishing it, thank God, I was just writing for fun, but if I'd shown you the book that I started writing when I was 12, it was just horrible. It was absolutely horrific. The whole bad boy with the bad temper is just the weirdest character to me, because why are we applauding somebody with anger issues? Why are we applauding this toxic behavior? First off, if he's a bad boy, I'm sorry, but I'm not even gonna give you the time of day, period. I don't want to find out that you're defiant and you don't like to listen to authority and you're angry and you punch walls. If somebody's punching walls, please walk away. Because in Wattpad, it's like, hey, if he's punching walls and getting angry and constantly getting in fights, that's cute. And I had to catch myself too, even with the book that I'm writing now, because I was trying to work on character flaws, and at first I was gonna make my character with a bad temper. Then I thought about it and I was like, this could go south really fast, and I'm not supporting abusive relationships. So instead I ended up going with the character flaw of being impulsive and being insecure. Number 4 is creating unrealistic characters. I think when you're a beginner in writing, it's like your first instinct to write the characters you wish existed. And the issue with that is, if you're wishing the person existed because they don't exist, don't write it because they don't exist. Unless you're writing something that involves magic. If you're just writing something that's realistic fiction, it has to be realistic. You cannot have a perfect character. If your main character has a love interest, a guy can't be entirely flawless. He can't be absolutely drop dead gorgeous, be charismatic, be chivalrous. He cannot be perfect. He has to have a flaw. He can't be understanding and always patient and never jealous and always at your hand and feet and always providing you with gifts and always kissing up on you and always there when you need him to and always answering and always texting you in the morning and night. Your character needs a flaw. I understand he's the love interest, and perhaps the problem is you're trying to write your dream guy in your book. You can do that, but he has to have a flaw. You can't make an unrealistic character, and when I first started writing, that is what I would do. I remember one time I had my friend read over one of my chapters and she was like, so what is his flaw? And I thought about that and I realized I hadn't given him one. And that even ties into putting yourself too much into your character. I constantly do this and have to go back and fix my character. You cannot put your entire self into your character. I understand it makes the writing process easier because then you know exactly what your character would do in every situation. I get that, but there is a danger to putting your entire self in your character. Especially if somebody doesn't like your character, you're gonna be very offended if they hate the character because it's you. Make your character realistic. Give them flaws. I watched this video and this woman even said, if you need to come up with a character flaw that's different from you, think of yourself and think of the complete opposite of yourself and put that as your character. It challenges you as a writer and it makes sure you're not putting yourself into your character. There's gonna be a part of your character that perhaps you don't like, but that's fine. Everybody has a flaw that people don't like. If there's no part of the character that you hate or dislike even a little bit, something needs to be tweaked because there's gonna be a flaw in your character that you don't like, but it needs needs to be there because it works for growth, it works for character development throughout the story. It keeps your character from being absolutely stale. Number 5 is overusing a thesaurus. I remember in one of my classes, I think I was probably in elementary school, I remember my teacher telling me that we need to use bigger words. She was like, you know, instead of using such a simple word, try and think of another word. Like, instead of using sad, maybe use depressed, maybe use in distress, you know? Use a bigger word than just sad, which can be right in some cases, but then there's also overkill. Don't be the thesaurus writer. And by that I mean the person who changes every other word with some other word you can find with thesaurus. We're not all meant to write literary books that belong in classrooms. Some of us are just meant to write regular young adult or teen fiction books that you pick up at Barnes & Noble and you read in the comfort of your home. Not all the books that we write are meant to be studied in a classroom or a college classroom setting. So stop writing like that's what it is. The worst part is, it won't sound natural. It will not sound natural at all. It will sound forced. It will sound like you use a thesaurus. So just stay away from doing it. It's not a good look. And I feel like I used to do that a lot. I feel like even now I have to catch myself not to do that, because you don't have to prove that you're smart. What makes a story good is not the vocabulary, it's the story itself. Coming up with an awesome plot should be number 1 before coming up with terrific words to use in every single sentence. I want to read a good story. I don't want to have to pause because I can barely understand one sentence. You try so hard to sound like a smart writer that people can't understand what you're writing. Number 6 is me, and I'm still working on it. Describing your character's looks in 1 paragraph. It's choppy and it's unnatural. That comes from Wattpad. Wattpad writers have a tendency to write out a character's entire physical description before we even get to anything. Character's physical description should be described throughout the book. Perhaps we don't find out that the character has brown hair until like chapter 3, and that's fine. We don't need to know that he has brown hair in the first chapter unless it's actually important to the story. Okay, so let's say we are in chapter 1 and your main character is talking to her sister, right? We don't have to say, hey, you did a terrific job, said Elizabeth, sliding a dark brown curly strand behind her ear that popped right back into place the minute after. She slipped her caramel fingers into her loose golden yellow pockets of her linen and polyester romper while leaning on her left leg in her snakeskin strappy 2-inch heels. Like, why? You don't have to explain the character's entire outfit, especially if it's not important. I understand that we're trying to give description, but after a while it can come off very choppy and a bit distracting. I think if you want to describe what a character looks like, spread it out in the book. It doesn't all have to be in one ginormous chapter. And I guess that ties into number 7, which is show, but don't show too much. We're taught in elementary and even middle school and grades above to show, don't tell. And although that is true, don't show too much. She said goodbye to her mother, grabbing the door handle just as her mother began bursting into tears. We don't have to say the tapping of her heels bounced off the walls in the tan bedroom as her hand slowly reached for the door handle, turned the silver metal, pulled the door slightly ajar just as the wailing cry of her mother pierced her ears. Okay, so here I feel like I didn't really explain it the best, because the 2 examples I provided you with, although one is shorter than the other, I still didn't really explain the whole show don't tell sort of thing, because it's not so much how much you write, but it's what you write. When you're trying to show rather than tell, it's about what the character feels, because rather than saying I was nervous, show how the person was nervous. And with the examples I provided, I didn't necessarily show that. We don't know how the character felt grabbing the door, or what was going through the character's head when they grabbed the doorknob, or how the mother felt. Was the mother out of breath? Was her face hot? Was her throat suddenly dry? Like, show in that sense. And now I'm going to provide an example of what it looks like to show and not tell, and showing too much. So this is an example of just telling, right? I stood outside the door. I was nervous to tell her. That's just telling. That doesn't really show me much, right? Here is showing and not telling. This is what is more preferred. I stood outside the door, my legs shaking and my heart racing. With my clammy hands, I reached for the doorknob. On the count of 3, I'll tell her, I thought. That's an even balance of showing and not telling. Now this is showing way too much. Leaning against the eggshell painted walls, I stood outside of her wooden door, shaking, sweating, and inhaling and exhaling aggressively.
I lifted my hand from the pocket of my corduroy emerald green pants and reached for the cool bronze doorknob. In 3 evenly timed seconds, I would gently turn the bronze doorknob and make my quiet entrance into her chamber, where I would release the truth begging to escape me. That's just wordy and excessive, and it sounds like you tried so hard to show and not tell. It should come out naturally. That sounds like a movie scene that's happening in slow motion, and you're writing a book.
Number 8, it's okay to start with but. We're taught so many rules in school and how you can't start a sentence with but, you can't start a sentence with and, you can't have a fragment. And although a lot of this can be true for certain areas, when you're writing a book or even a poem, but we'll talk about poems later, when you're writing a story, there's a little bit of wiggle room to write it how you want. I've read books where the author has had one word and a period. For instance, I've read a book where it said please, period, don't, period, go. It does make a bit of a difference, and something like that can be considered several fragments, but it's just how the author chose to write it, and I have no issue with that. Sometimes an author will start an entire paragraph with the word but. I'm not saying to completely ignore all the laws of grammar, but at the same time, there is that bit of space where you can write it how you want to write it. Number 9, your first draft can be trash. Your first draft does not have to be perfect, because there is the revising and editing period where you go back and you fix your mistakes, you add or take away what does or doesn't need to be in the story, and you perfect the story. I have a habit of doing that where I will keep editing as I go. You're supposed to write and edit after. You don't have to edit as you go, because if you do that, you will never move on. You'll be stuck on chapter 1 for like 3 months. I like to write on Google Docs because that way I can write everywhere I go. So what I do is, if I'm writing and I look over the chapter and I don't love it, I'm not going to rewrite the entire chapter. I'll leave little author's notes so I know to go back to that when I go into the revising and editing period. Besides, there can be multiple revising periods. You don't have to just edit and revise once. You can do that entire process, go back to the beginning, and do it again. It's fine. It's your book. And number 10, with good writing comes confidence in your work. Although writing is subjective but also has objective components, you need confidence in your work. If you're not confident in what you've written, you're always gonna think it's trash. I'm hard on myself as well, but I have to understand that I still love what I write. I have a habit of sometimes writing something and then reading it over and hating it the very next day. But if you loved it in that moment, keep it. When you go back to the revising and editing period, it'll be fresh again in your head. It's never a good idea to write something and then read it over and over and over just after you've written it, because you will grow tired of it. If you write it, let it sit, forget about it, write the whole book, come back and read it again, you might still love it and find that there was nothing wrong with it in the first place. Be confident in your work, because everybody has a different writing style, and I don't think we should compare ourselves to other people, because your writing is your writing. The point is that your style is your style, and you have to be comfortable with that. I'm gonna go because this person's gonna keep on mowing their lawn and I'm going to lose my actual mind. I really hope this was very helpful, and I was really just sharing what I've learned. This is really just my opinion. Some of what I say could be wrong or right. I don't know. I'm still an amateur. And I will catch you guys in my next video. Peace, love, and unity. Deuces.